Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, our brethren in Kansas, in Georgia, in Missouri, in Texas, in Chicago, Illinois, in Arkansas, in California, in New York, in Pennsylvania, in Canada, in Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, in Africa, Kenya, Zambia, Pakistan, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, and also to our brethren in Malaysia and in Indonesia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. I would like to read this statement on Juana's Pocket Edition on page 57. This is our special episode number 11. Just an hour prophetic study as the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. It says here, explain the cost, the reason, the significance of former things. He demands, tell us, what do they mean? What are they for? Can you predict the future by the past? Be it good or be it bad. Exhibit divine power if you can. One is our Pocket Edition, page 57. Here in 2TG, number 9, on page 14, it says, here is a challenge to all our adversaries. Let them tell you what shall happen hereafter, if they can. Or let them tell the past, if they will. God challenges them, thus they may now know that they are as nothing. And those who choose to follow them, even they shall be an abomination to him. 2TG, number 9, page 14. So, what shall happen hereafter? That is one of the wonderful promise given in the book of Revelation. I will show unto thee which must shortly come to pass. Here in track number 5, page 32, the statements which must shortly come to pass. Revelation 1 verse 1. And I will show thee things which must be hereafter. Revelation 4 verse 1. Go to say that the revelation is given with the one particular object in view of showing the things lying not behind but ahead of John's time, with reference being made only incidentally to the past, in order to lay the necessary foundation upon which to build the future. And I do fully believe that this promise, saying, I will show unto thee, which will be hereafter, which will soon come to pass. The particular object in view is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. The commencement of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Here in track number 15, page 35, it says, having now gone through these preliminaries, the student of advancing truth should be ready understandingly to study the revelation of the things which are to prepare the way and enable him wholeheartedly to know that now the time is at hand, that a knowledge of the revelation will enable him to stand in the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Track number 15 on page 35. So only through the knowledge in the book of Revelation will enable us to survive the great and dreadful day of the Lord. I remember the statement on 7 symbolic code, 7 to 12, page 19. It says, what is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? 7 symbolic code, 7 to 12, page 19. What is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? Is the great and dreadful day of the Lord the same event as the second coming of Christ? Answer. As seen from Malachi 4 verse 5, the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes as the result of the proclamation of the message of Elijah the prophet. Thus, rather than being Christ's second appearing, it is obviously, on the one hand, He's setting His seal upon the forehead of the righteous. Revelation 14 verse 1, Revelation 7 verse 9. And bringing His judgments, the wrath of the Lamb, upon the wicked. Revelation 6 verse 15 to 17. And on the other hand, Satan's warring against the remnant. Revelation 12 verse 17. This conflict between God and Satan brings in the time of trouble such as never was, at the beginning of which Michael stands to deliver everyone. That shall be found written in the book. Daniel 12 verse 1. It is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Great for the righteous, dreadful for the wicked. It says, it is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Great for the righteous, dreadful for the wicked. Once it begins, it continues. As the spirit of prophecy says, without respite to the end, Christ's second appearing. 7 symbolic odes, 7 to 12, page 19. The shepherd's rod made it so plain in tract number 3 on page 50 and page 51. Tract number 3, page 50 and 51. As the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary is a work of cleansing the books by blotting from them the names of both the backsliders and the tares. And as at the time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, the only ones who shall be delivered are those whose names are found written in the book. The cleansing of the books, therefore, obviously takes place before the resurrection and before the time of trouble, such as never was. Thus the unfaithful dead will be left in their graves at the first resurrection, and the unfaithful living will be left without deliverance from the coming trouble. But were their names allowed to remain in the books, then according to the records, either the wicked dead would have to be resurrected with the righteous, and the living wicked delivered with the living righteous, or else both the righteous dead and the righteous living would have to be forsaken with them, alternatives, both of which, of course, are impossible. Thus again making mandatory an absolute separation as instanced in type in Joshua's time. And we know that it is pointing to the time when Achan had been destroyed in the valley of Achor. Recorded in Joshua chapter 7, verse 13, 24 to 25. Now, brethren, the shepherd's rod made it so plain that according to the Bible, Daniel 12, verse 1, as stated in tract number 3, page 50 and page 51, that at the commencement of the time of trouble, all the names found written in the Lamb's Book of Life, not sealed with 7 seals, will be delivered. And the shepherd's rod says, therefore, if the names of the wicked will be allowed to remain in the Lamb's Book of Life at the commencement of the time of trouble, and since God cannot deny Himself, Apostle Paul says in 2 Timothy that God cannot deny Himself, where the names of the wicked will still allowed to remain in the Lamb's Book of Life at the commencement of the time of trouble, according to the shepherd's rod, then God would be obliged to deliver the wicked, both the wicked dead and the living wicked, together with the righteous. But it is an impossible thing. And that is why the shepherd's rod declared clearly that all the names of the wicked will be completely blotted out in the Lamb's Book of Life prior to the commencement of the time of trouble. So that is very plain. In tract number 3, page 50, and page 51. Now let's read tract number 3. Tract number 3 on page 73 and page 74. It says, being the Day of Atonement in time for both the dead and the living, this service of the earthly tabernacle therefore projects the Day of Atonement in its antitype, the cleansing of the sanctuary in heaven from unworthy names in the books, and the cleansing of the church on earth from its unconverted and unstable members, thus bringing the time of clean books, clean church, and clean people. Now let us analyze closely the statement in tract number 3, page 73 and page 74. It says here, brothers and sisters, that pointing to the last and final Day of Atonement, by which, after that final Day of Atonement, it says, all unworthy names in the books will be blotted out. And it says, thus bringing the time of clean books. Now, brothers and sisters, in the heavenly sanctuary, the only book to be cleansed is the Lamb's books of life. All other books, they will not be cleansed. For example, the book of death. All the names recorded therein are the names of the wicked, and it will not be cleansed. And the only book to be cleansed is the Lamb's Book of Life. And the only reason why the shepherd's rod inscribe it in plural form, because the Lamb's Book of Life is divided into 7 divisions. First seal, second seal, third seal, fourth seal, fifth seal, sixth seal, and seventh seal. Now let's read again the statement in tract number 3. On page 7, it says, that not every name that has been entered into the Lamb's books will be retained there, is borne out with sad conclusiveness by the following scriptures. And the Lord said unto Moses, whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. So it was inscribed in singular form. Blot out of my book. Exodus 32, verse 33. Then it says, and if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. Revelation 22 verse 19. Accordingly, the books contained the names of a mixed multitude, both those who stood firmly in the faith and continued patiently to the end, and those who did not. Said Christ, he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Matthew 24 verse 13. But those who do not endure shall be lost. And to repeat again, the only reason why the shepherds would inscribe it in plural form, Lamb's books, because that Lamb's book of life is divided into 7 sections. Now let's read here in track number 15 on page 9. It says, the first and most important thing that takes place in this solemn assembly is the opening of the book. It should be remembered too that the book is sealed with 7 seals. Revelation 5 verse 1. It being in 7 sections, each section individually sealed. 7 seals in all are consecutively broken, permitting each section to unfold its own contents. So, the Lamb's book of life is divided into 7 divisions. So that is the reason why it is called Lamb's books of life. And the 7th division is still divided into another subdivisions. It says here in 2TG number 12, page 25. 2TG number 12, page 25. The last of the seals, the 7th, is subdivided into still other 7 divisions. 2TG 12:25. So the 7th seal still subdivided into 7 subdivisions. So there are 14 all in all. Number 7 indicates completeness, right? And that is why Revelation chapter 5, there are only 14 verses. Because that is the chapter by which explain the book sealed with 7 seals. Divided into 14 verses because this book is subdivided into 14 divisions. First 7 divisions, but the last, the 7th, is still subdivided into another 7 divisions. And chapter 5 itself is the number of the Bible. Revelation chapter 5. Now let us now focus our attention, brothers and sisters, to this very important prophecy. The shepherd's rod plainly told us that before the great and dreadful day of the Lord will begin, the books in the heavenly sanctuary must be completely cleansed first. The Lamb's books of life. But we are now dealing the 7th seal, the last division of the Lamb's book of life. The congregation among the living. The last section to be cleansed. Because the seventh seal that had been subdivided into 7 divisions, the 7 divisions, all the names to be entered into the pages of that last 7 divisions is no longer mixed multitude. Only the names of the righteous, because it already pertains to the great multitude. Pertains to the great multitude, by which there will be no more bad to be cast out. Now, I would like to read to you the statement in track number 5. Track number 5, page 110. It says, but why leave out the court? It is concerning Revelation 11, verse 2. And it's very important. This verse, Revelation 11, verse 2. And the more we study the judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, the more our understanding will be enlightened. The occurrences that will take place on this earth. Because according to the Shepherd's Rod, here in 1 Azar 231, it says, the wisdom and knowledge of the infinite is beyond comprehension by the finite. The wonders we behold and the events which makes the history of our world are but duplicates from the blueprints in heaven. 1 SR 231. So the events which makes the history of our world are but duplicates from the blueprints in heaven. And such blueprints is found only in the judicial proceedings that takes place in the heavenly sanctuary. That is why in the great controversy 423 it says, light from the sanctuary illumine the past, the present, and the future. Now, I would like to read track number 5, page 110. But why leave out the court? Now, let us read first Revelation 11, verse 2. But the court which is without the temple, leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. And this subject is closely connected, brethren, to the current events that occurring now in the Palestine. I would like to read to you one of the on the piled card of B.T. Hotep. It is taken from the filed card. although this was recorded here in 2TG 15, page 10. The reading material published by the Bayesian Advocators. But it was taken from the card file of B.T. Hotep, February 1953. Try to 2TG 15:10. It is possible that the 42 months of Revelation 11 verse 2 occupy an entirely different period of time than the 1,260 days mentioned in Revelation 13. For Jerusalem did not begin to be trodden underfoot in 538 AD, but was completely taken and destroyed in 70 AD. The holy city is still underfoot and will be until the Gentiles drive out the Gentiles as predicted in Zechariah chapter 1 verse 21. So it is closely connected to Zechariah 1 verse 21. Not any part of the city will be underfoot after then, at which time the kingdom, the church purified, is set up there. The truth concerning the 42 months during which time the holy city is trodden underfoot by the Gentiles is therefore not completely revealed, and had better be left alone until God makes it known. It was written by B.T. Hotep in 1953, and he died without revealing Revelation 11 verse 2. Now, this is very important question to all my fellow Shepherd's Rod believer. We know that this is the very truth that causes great embarrassment among the media. Because when B.T. Hotep died, Florence Hotep began to engage in private interpretation, and not only Florence Hotep, many Davidians. That is why, in answerer number 5, page 55, private interpretation is the great evil. Now, this is an honest question. Since this is a very important prophecy, Revelation 11, verse 2, and since it was not revealed in the days of B.T. Hotep, although B.T. Hotep says, Revelation 11, verse 2 is still prophecy. It was not fulfilled during the Dark Ages. It was not fulfilled during the apostles. And B.T. Hotep says, it was not completely revealed in his lifetime. Just this statement was written 1953, just 2 years after B.T. Hotep died. Now, the important question is that, is this prophecy will be revealed? Or this prophecy will remain unrevealed? Think it thoroughly, brethren. The statement in track number 2 on page, track number 2 on page 12, saying, never has this symbolical prophecy been understood by any people, and never could it have been fulfilled and not been revealed. So the statement says, never could it have been fulfilled and not been revealed. For God will not waste the time of His servant to write those prophecies, but there is no significance at all. How much more in the book of Revelation, Revelation 11, verse 2. Do you believe that Revelation 11, verse 2 must be revealed prior to its fulfillment? If you believe that Revelation 11, verse 2 will be revealed prior to its fulfillment, in what way? By which such revelation there is no other way. With Horeb says, indeed truth is never revealed in any other way but by inspiration. Now, let us read Jezreel letter, number 2, on page 2. It says, indeed truth is never revealed in any other way but by inspiration. Indeed, truth is never revealed in any other way but by inspiration. So that is the only medium that God revealed the truth, through the channel of inspiration. So if you will say that Horeb is the last prophet, then you cut off the communication line from heaven. Completely cut off. Then how could our Almighty God communicate His people? The only channel by which God can communicate His people is through the channel of inspiration. That is the statement in answerer number 3. It says here, page 30, hence, any objection to inspiration. So, the word any meaning whatever it is, whatever the reason of such objection to inspiration, can only, in the last analysis, be an attempt to put God out of sight and to bring men to the front, to cut off the only channel through which God can interpret the scriptures, communicate with His people, reveal truth, and unmask error. You see, brothers and sisters, and would you think it is not Satan's subversives to cut off the communication line? So objection to inspiration, that is Satan's subversives. Here in White House Recruiter, on page 54, it says, Satan subversives have sought to sever the lines of communication between the Spirit of truth and the people of God. I remember the statement in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 300. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 300. It is Satan's settled purpose to cut off all communication between God and His people, that he may practice his deceptive wills or deceptive wiles with no voice to warn them of their danger. No voice to warn them of their danger. And Horeb says, in 2TG number 24, on page 21, 2TG number 24, page 21, Now then, if it is truth that makes anyone free, and if it comes only through inspiration, the truth will come only through inspiration. Brothers and sisters, when the prophet died, the gift of inspiration became quiescent. Answer error number 3, page 60. It says, brothers and sisters, and if it comes only through inspiration, and if Christendom fails to recognize this, and thus give God no chance to save it, then what is to be its fate? And also the fate of the church itself, you know the answer. 2TG 24, page 21. Now let us now go back, brethren, to our very important subject. The great and dreadful day of the Lord. The shepherd's rod plainly told us on the General Conference Special on pages 10 and page 11. It says, to know when, I would like to begin in the upper part. Important as it is, however, to keep in mind that the time in which to expect Elijah is before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Yet, just this knowledge alone is insufficient. That knowledge, to know that there is Elijah to come before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, is not enough. It is insufficient. Then it says, to know when and what the great and dreadful day itself is all important. Without this knowledge, who could possibly discern Elijah when he should come? What knowledge by which it is all important? There are two. When would be the great and dreadful day of the Lord? And what is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? You might peruse to read the entire Shepherd's Rod publications. The only thing that had been explained by B.T. Horeb is, what is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? But he never declared when would be the great and dreadful day of the Lord. How could he be able to proclaim when would be the great and dreadful day of the Lord, by which he himself did not know when would it be? It's so because that portion of truth, such knowledge will be bestowed by God to antitypical Elijah that is by. The work of antitypical Elijah, John the Baptist, is to explain what is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. But to proclaim when would be the great and dreadful day of the Lord, never been proclaimed by B.T. Horeb, because he was not antitypical Elijah that is by. Brethren, the shepherd's rod declared clearly here in General Conference Special on page 19. it says here, to re-emphasize the fact, let it be said again, that being the last of the prophets, Elijah is, therefore, the only one who can open to our understanding all the prophecies of the scriptures pertaining to the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Prophecies which heretofore had been only mysteries to all. Thus he is, as the scriptures say, to blow the trumpet in Zion and to sound an alarm in God's holy mountain, in the church. The General Conference Special, page 19. That is very plain. No one can explain the great and dreadful day of the Lord except Elijah. To explain what is the great and dreadful day of the Lord, there is only one prophet that explained what is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. That is B.T. Hoffer, antitypical Elijah, John the Baptist. But to proclaim when would be the great and dreadful day of the Lord, B.T. Hoffer never proclaimed. He himself says that it is still future in his days. Now, let me read to you Answerer, number 3. This is the declaration given by the prophet. Answerer number 3, page 88. It says, and looking forward to the time of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Answerer number 3, page 88. And looking forward to the time of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the time just ahead of us. So B.T. Hotep made it so plain that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is still ahead in their days. The Lord admonishes the people who will be living at that time, inscribed in future tense. And if you will read track number 13 on page 11, it says here, remember ye all who shall witness. It did not say all who had been witness. No. But inscribed in future occurrence. Remember ye all who shall witness the destruction of the wicked described above. The law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. And if you will read, brothers and sisters, the statutes and judgments which God commanded to his people, given to Moses in Horeb, it is even more particularly pertaining to the antitypical Passover. And we will show to you all the evidences when God commanded Moses. You can read in Exodus chapter 5, verse 1. Let my people go, that they might observe a feast unto me in the wilderness. And that event is typological. And it is closely connected, brethren, to the Palestine situation. I would like to read first this reading in track number 13, page 11. It says, This command to keep the law which Moses received in Horeb is, according to the scriptures, to all who are to be living. To all who are to be living in the great and dreadful day of the Lord. It did not say to all who are to be living before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. No. But to all who are to be living in the period when the great and dreadful day of the Lord is in progress. What is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? By the way, here in 1 TG 28, on page 15, it says, the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the judgment for the living, the day in which all things are to be restored. So I would like to read again. 1 TG 28, page 15. The great and dreadful day of the Lord, the judgment for the living, the day in which all things are to be restored. So the voice of inspiration made it so plain that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is the judgment for the living, by which that is the time in which all things are to be restored. Here in 1 TG number 11, page 12. 1 TG number 11, page 12. Blind to this truth, to the judgment for the living, the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the day in which all things are to be restored. And one of the prominent brothers and sisters occurrence in the fulfillment of this prophecy is the restoration, the reestablishing of the creation calendar, by which it was not restored in the days of Jehovah. So let's read again the statement here in track number 13, page 11. This command to keep the law which Moses received in Horeb is, according to the scriptures, to all who are to be living in the great and dreadful day of the Lord. What does it mean? In, meaning, the great and dreadful day of the Lord is in progress. What is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? The judgment for the living. 1 TG 28, page 15. 1 TG 11, page 12. And Jehovah testify that the judgment that pertains to the living was still future in his days. Track number 3 on page 43. It says, as the cleansings called for in the parables and in Malachi's prophecy have never taken place, the investigative judgment of the living is obviously then yet future. It was written 1934. And in 1944, the prophet says they were still living in the period of the judgment of the dead. Answerer number 2 on page 93. Obvious is this fact, because the nations among themselves have always been angry and are angry even today, although we are still in the time of the judgment of the dead. That is the testimony of the prophet, says we are still in the period of the judgment of the dead. Ponder deeply, brethren. But this antitypical Elijah that is by, God sends this prophet in the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Not before, but in the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Living when God sends to the world His last prophet, the antitypical Elijah. Track number 13 on page 11. Brethren, whether we believe it or not, we are living in a very confused world. In the days of B.T. Horeb, there is only one group of the Bijan. But today, look at our situation today. I would like to read this reading in track number 6, page 79. It says, "So of the whole matter now, let the saints hear and give heed to the conclusion. In the fullness of light pervading these pages, the reader should see, as in noonday brightness, that the ever-present spirit of prophecy alone." Does the spirit of prophecy is present when the prophet is dead? Think thoroughly. It is contrariwise. B.T. Horeb says when the prophet died, the living spirit of prophecy became inactive, quiescent, no longer manifesting itself. If it is not manifesting, is it present? Answerer number 3, page 60. That statement is not difficult to understand if we will not close our eyes in understanding. Upon the death of Sister White in 1915, the gift of inspiration, the active spirit of prophecy became quiescent, no longer manifesting itself for a time. With the church thus cut off from the very source of its life, as was the Jewish church from the death of the prophet Malachi to the rise of John the Baptist, how could it maintain its vitality and growth? Hence now as then, there has followed the same inevitable spiritual malnutrition and deformity accompanied with a long train of woes. Would you think that statement cannot be applied when B.T. Horeb died? We should not twist the meaning of the Word of God because it will not benefit us at all. The shepherds had plainly told us that in track number 5, page 86, it says, track number 5, page 86, as a matter of fact, trying to obscure the light on any other Bible truth will in no way darken or doom it, but only darken and doom himself. So it says here, let me read to you again the statement here in track number 6, page 79. So of the whole matter now, let the saints hear and give heed to the conclusion. In the fullness of light pervading these pages, the reader should see, as in noonday brightness, that the ever-present spirit of prophecy alone is able to cope with the confusion in the world today, resulting from the many winds of doctrine. Behold, says the word, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. To him shalt thou hearken. And you know what? The quotation given here is Isaiah 30, verse 25, 27, and 28. and ponder deeply what is Isaiah 30, verse 25, 27, and 28. We will explain it in our next episode. But I would like to show to you that that chapter and that verse is also quoted in tract 15 on page 55. You can read Isaiah 30, verse 27 and 28, then Nahum chapter 2, verse 3. Nahum chapter 2, verse 3, that is world war. And therefore, Isaiah 30, verse 27 and 28 is closely connected to the subject, world war. And here, brothers and sisters, it was also connect in tract number 6, page 79, and page 80, Isaiah 30, verse 27 and verse 28. So this admonition given by God, to him thou shalt hearken, to antitypical Elijah the Tishbite, is pointing to the time when World War II is about to blow. Brothers and sisters, it says here in 1 TG, I think 2 TG, it says here in 2 TG number, let me read to you, 2 TG number 41 on page 18. Just how this is to come about, I do not know. But I do know that the greatest of all wars is to be fought about the Holy Land. To TG 41, page 18. Just how this is to come about, I do not know. But I do know that the greatest of all wars is to be fought about the Holy Land. Or in other words, the conflicting factor is Jerusalem. Jerusalem will became the burden stone. And here, brothers and sisters, in 2 TG 41 on page 16, it says, anyone can see that the world is fast getting ready to resume the war with a mightier and final blow if possible. 2 TG 41, page 16. Anyone can see that the world is fast getting ready to resume the war with a mightier and final blow if possible. We will discuss that tomorrow on our next episode. We will try to investigate seriously, honestly, brothers and sisters, so that we could be profited what the shepherd's rod teaches to prepare our lives before the final blow of that greatest conflict, which soon, very soon, will be finally realized. So hoping that the good Lord will bless us and will help us. We love you, brethren. And our only objective is to warn the people, to prepare our lives. Whatever denomination you belong, more particularly to all our fellow shepherds and believers, we love you, brethren, and hope that we could see in God's kingdom, by which soon, very soon, it will be established. Thank you very much. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful